So we're gonna start, and Rick's gonna start with some music, and he's gonna explain the meaning of what he's gonna do. Lord, be with us.
Well, good morning. Yeah, so it's very strange. I don't know if I want more of that or less of that. So what I was hoping to do was something that's kind of, it's a little different. I'm not going to sing, even though I have this microphone here. This is only here to talk to you. I'm sure we're all glad for that.
No, not at all.
So yeah, it's going to be instrumental. It's going to be sort of continuous. It's kind of, I kind of know roughly what I'm doing, but what I'm going to do, but not completely. So it's somewhat, quasi-improvised. But the idea behind it is to sort of create a meditative space. To find some kind of, I know there will be music, but some kind of silence, if you will, like more internally than obviously, because I'm making sounds already. Because I'm accidentally touching the keyboard. But yeah, so that's the plan. So if you feel comfortable with this, I would like to suggest, first off, if you have your phone, if you put it on stun, that would be really great. Just because, not because it's going to interrupt me, but because it's going to interrupt you, right? So, and because I already have mine on Do Not Disturb, I thought about that ahead of time. Because this isn't going to be very long, but, honestly, probably take maybe 10 minutes, is that okay?
It's okay.
Yeah, so this is like 10 minutes of your life where you're like incommunicado. And hopefully the world won't end in about 10 minutes. If it does, I guess we'll all know. Anyway. We'll all know. We'll all know together. So what I'd like to start with is to try to get us sort of kind of the right space to do that. I hope this is do whatever woo-woo for you. But let's just, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths, okay? And at the exhale on the third one, if you're comfortable with it, closing your eyes would be great. Okay? So we're going to do the first one. Let's do the third one. Close our eyes on the exhale.
That was just beautiful. I don't know about you guys. Did you have anything? Did you think of anything? For me, it felt like I was kind of. It was like messages to the deeper part of me, and it was like a call to wake up. And sometimes I could see the better sides of me, and sometimes I could see the darker sides of me, and I felt like it was all good, that God's grace was coming and touching it all. What about you guys? Was that the same?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the same.
Really?
It's like how I got to.
Yeah.
Like transformation.
Yeah, transformation.
Just like the dark to light, like kind of,
Yeah.
you know, dark pits. Like you have to get in it.
You have to what?
You have to get in it to go through it.
You have to get in it to go through it.
Yeah. But you can go through it.
But you can go through it. That's really good. You have to get in it to go through it. Wow. To me, there were early on the bird sound, and then later on the rain, and it was just so refreshing and interesting. And I spent a lot of time thinking about other people. But then every once in a while I go, oh no, look at me. Thank you so much. It's just it's a really different experience for us. Thank you. So what we're trying to do in services with, we've been in this service thinking about hoping that every week we can find something that is a piece of poetry or a piece of music or worship songs or folk songs or songs of meaning that someone's written. So in other words, every week we're hoping for something that's like a gift from someone's heart that's performed for us in some living way. I don't mean performance, maybe is the wrong word, but it's something living to go along with the things that we'll say and teach about history or philosophy or theology or anything else that we do, or justice work or anything else that we do, but also to have something that's like a gift, that's this living expression. And our creative coordinator is Tina, artistic coordinator. So thank you so much for bringing us this week. And Rick, thank you for being an instrument to share that. So I know it's been a real hard season for Pete. It's just because of the loss of your son and also because of the accident, the baby getting stuck in your grandson's eye. And Pete's just had a sadness that's been on him for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I've been, the part of my time I just was really just praying for you, that in the music I could hear sort of little touches of grace, and I was just looking forward to the period of time when you'll feel more like yourself again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lord, I ask for that gift. I ask that, I don't know how long it takes, and I know that grieving is very important, but I ask that you, at some point, I pray that you give Pete a confidence that he'll walk out of the sadness and into a new and deep appreciation of life. So please be with him. Thanks. What about others? Are there things we should be praying for? Okay, I didn't technically bring a sermon today. I've been working most of the summer on historical content for the work that I have to do at the university. And I thought for once maybe I'd just share a little bit of that kind of work. So it's not like I don't have a theme figured out or anything, although I have one that I'm playing with. But mostly I just have a whack of material. And I thought what I'd do is kind of play with it and just share some ideas with you. So please feel free to interact. Like if something seems good to you, isn't that a great idea? Couldn't we have more of that? Or if something seems terrible to you, please feel free to go, what? So I want to talk about Martin Luther, and maybe we could start with the PowerPoint. I've been doing these videos. I've had to do 30. No, I think 28 videos for my work in the graduate program, and it's because of COVID. You know, normally I just have people gathered and I get people to read things and then we talk about them. It's been quite easy. But it's not the same when you have to do a video lecture. You actually have to know something. So I've been working like crazy to understand things that normally I just get people to share their ideas about. And this one on the left is a portrait of Martin Luther done later in life by a friend of his, Lucas Cranach III. But on the right is a picture of Martin Luther King. And you probably can sense that there's something similar about their names. And that's because there was a Baptist pastor in 1934 from Georgia whose name was Michael King, who went to an international Baptist pastors conference in Germany. And he learned the story of Martin Luther, and he was so impressed that he actually officially changed his name to Martin Luther King. But he had named his son, his 5-year-old son, Michael. He had named Michael after him. So then he decided that what he should do is change Michael's name too. So Martin Luther King Jr. And so it's kind of fascinating to think, you know, I'm beginning, in the fall, I'm beginning the module that goes from roughly 1500 to today in church history. And it's kind of fascinating to think of it sort of being bookended by the two Martin Luthers. Because Martin Luther, the first one, is a very interesting character. He is so full of heroic attributes, and he is also a scallywag. And you know, there's so much good and so much bad. And he, you know, he creates one of the greatest divisions in Christian history. When you look at all the way back, 2,000 years back, to me it seems like Jesus dreamed of a community that was built on compassion. And I envision it as a circle. To me, it's not a place where people are above others. It's a place where everyone is accepted, where people are accepted no matter what country they come from, no matter what their economic status is, no matter what their gender is. That's what I think Jesus envisions. He envisions something that no one's ever seen before, a place where some people are not more important than others. See, in religious communities, in the world that Jesus lived in, some people were more important than others because they obeyed the rules better. And in the Greco-Roman society all around, some people were more important than others because they had more money, or because they had more land, or but I think Jesus saw something which nobody had seen, which was the dream. Well, a few Greek philosophers had thought of it, but they only managed to pull it off in a garden for a short time. And I think that what Jesus saw was the dream of a place where people were not despised if they were considered lower for some reason. And this is an incredible vision. And I think that St. Paul saw it too. And I think that the early church tried to build it. But I don't think it was very long at all before everybody defaulted back to normal. And what they did is they created structures where men were more important than women. They created structures where certain kinds of people had all of the power in the group. And I don't think this was Jesus' vision at all. So when we look at the sort of the sweep of church history, one of the great turning points comes at about the year 311 or 312, when a powerful Roman marshal or Roman military leader named Constantine wins a battle and attributes the win to a vision that he had the night before, which was a Christian son. His mother was a Christian, and he thinks that he won a battle based on the blessing of the Christian God. And so from that point on, Christianity achieves a favored status in the Roman Empire. It doesn't become the official religion of the Roman Empire till way later in the century, after Constantine's time, but in Constantine's time, it becomes favored. And all of the favor that had gone to the earlier Roman religion suddenly goes to the Christian religion. Now, up to this point, Christianity had been heavily persecuted, you know, sometimes worse than others. Certain areas the church had been able to get a stable foothold, but in other areas, suddenly suddenly there were moments of persecution where many people were killed and all their property taken. And And now somebody becomes the leader, is favorable towards this group. And he starts to insist that all the property that had been taken away from people is returned. And he says that the bishops should be as important in society. They should have access to him. They should get a pension. They should have servants. They should have all kinds of privileges. And what happens is a very great change takes place. The Christianity that was sort of persecuted, and you had to really believe in it to be a part of it, suddenly it becomes a socially advantageous position. And so people think that around the year 310 or 311, that probably about 10% of the Roman Empire was Christian, but by about the year 350, maybe half of the population was Christian. But it was a different kind of Christianity. Now it's one where it's kind of an advantage politically to be a Christian. So not everybody likes that, and some people rebel against it, and we have a whole movement of people going out to live as desert saints, as hermits, as people that want to live contemplative life, who want to live a difficult life. They want to get away from this thing that they consider as sort of a mild or fake Christianity. So that's one of the big turning points, right around 311. And it'll never be the same after that. Christianity will always be kind of wrapped around politics after that. So that when you look at the United States, you see an example. We could also see it in other cultures, certainly in Britain, but we also in Russia before. So what you see is that Christianity doesn't remain a pure thing. It becomes something wrapped around a nation's vision of itself. So all the religious language gets used, but it's really sometimes more a form of patriotism and nationalism than it is pure following of Christ. So that's a very interesting thing and hard to figure out sometimes. You look at this last few years and you see great division in the Christian church, like 81% of white evangelicals who thought that Donald Trump was God's Messiah. That God was, and you think, how did you get to that crazy place? 19% that are saying, no, that's the exact wrong way to go. But you've got 81% in the States, for instance, that was the right thing. And so what you've got is a very great division, and it's all wrapped around, it's not a pure God message anymore. It's wrapped around, what do you think is the best way for a society to go? Now, another great change is going to happen in 1054. So 1,000 years after Jesus, a great change is going to take place. And this change is going to be the division between the Orthodox Christians and the Roman Catholic Christians. They've all been one up to this point. But in 1054, there's going to be a spat between the Eastern group, which is considered the Orthodox Christian world, and the Western group, which is considered the Catholic world. And they're going to split, and it's just going to seem like a child. Like if you read the words, it just seems like we're in charge. No, we're in charge. And it's just the silliest things. Is the Pope in Rome is he the greatest bishop? And it just feels like children having a spat when they're 10 years old. So you see the church sort of rip apart, and there's one great tearing. Now in 1054, we've got, the Eastern group, they speak Greek. They've got a different kind of theology. The Western group, they're going to follow the Pope's lead. And there's a big division. But here comes the greatest division of all, and that's going to be the Protestant Reformation. And it starts in 1517, when Martin Luther, the guy that I've been studying all day, or all summer, when Martin Luther is offended because somebody comes into the little area in Germany that he lives in. Germany and so many of the European countries don't become the countries that we think of today until relatively recently. Like, I think it's 1871 that Italy, or 1881 that Italy becomes a nation. Something similar for Germany. It's not the nations that we think of today were more often organized in smaller groups led by nobility, smaller areas led by nobility. So Martin Luther lives in one of these. His elector, or his duke, is Duke Frederick the Wise. He's a very powerful man because they have a very similar situation to the American political situation, which is they have electors who elect the empire, the emperor in Europe, the one who's going to hold everything together, the strongest political ruler is going to, there are only 7 people who have the vote to see who that will be. And this Frederick, who is over the area that Martin Luther is in, is one of these people. He has an incredibly important vote. So it's not because he's so wealthy or his area is so powerful, it's because he's got an important vote that people actually will listen to what he has to say. And thank goodness, because this guy, this renegade university professor, monk turned university professor turned reformer, this man, Martin Luther, is in this area, and he gets a little bit of protection that he wouldn't have gotten anywhere else, because his elector, his duke, has a vote that other people cherish. So anyway, let's go on just a bit in this. Oh, thanks. Martin Luther's dates are 1483 to 1546. And I don't think I'll tell you this all, but there's a lot of things that are leading up to this moment. But especially this one. 100 years before Martin Luther, there's someone in Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia named Jan Hus. And Jan Hus is going to be ultimately considered a heretic, and he is going to be offered a safe conduct to come to have his views examined. His views are considered so radical. He thinks that it's okay to speak in Czechoslovakian instead of in Latin in the church service. He thinks that priests should be able to marry. He thinks that you don't need to wear priest garb when you're preaching. And he thinks that the communion, he thinks the scriptures should be in Czechoslovakian. He's really learned a lot from John Wycliffe in England. And he thinks that everybody should receive, not just priests, everybody should receive both elements in communion. The other thing that he thinks is that the scripture should be the authority, not the church councils, not what the church says. So they bring him, they consider him a heretic, and they promise him safe conduct, but they consider when he says what he believes at the trial, they consider it so outrageous that they take away the safe conduct and they burn him at the stake a kilometer outside of town. And just as they're putting him to death, this is from Fox's Book of Martyrs, which was published in 1563 in England. When the faggots were piled up to his very neck, the Duke of Bavaria was so officious as to desire him to abjure. No, said Hus. In other words, submit. Even now, even now submit. And he says, no, said Hus, I never preached any doctrine of an evil tendency, and what I taught with my lips I now seal with my blood. He then said to the executioner, you are now going to burn a goose. And that's actually what his name, Hus, means in Czech. You are now going to burn a goose, but in a century you will have a swan whom you can neither roast nor boil. And ironically, Martin Luther, who comes 102 years later to nail 95 theses on a university chapel door in 1517, he's 102 years after this event, there's a swan in his coat of arms. So it's a kind of a fascinating, yeah. Well, in fact, when I said I may have a theme, this is the thing that kind of attracts me in doing this work, is I find some symmetries just fascinating. Like, to me, it's almost like mysterious. It feels like the work of the Spirit weaving in and through the human events. So, like, John, could you put up the other thing for a minute? My notes. Instead of looking at this PowerPoint for a minute, I'd like to come back to it, but I'd like to look at this. Martin Luther's name was Luther, Ludher, originally. He changes his name. I'll tell you why in a sec. But, or maybe you can see here. But he was born to Hans and Margaret Luther at Eisleben. I don't know how you say that. How would you say it? You guys that have lived in Germany, anybody? Do you say Eisleben? 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 Okay. So he was born there on November 10th. And on November 11th, as was the custom, he was baptized by his parents. But that was the feast day of Saint Martin of Tours. who was one of the great early church fathers from the 4th century. So he did this family did what was normal, was they named him according to the feast day of the saint. So he's named Martin because it's November 11th, the day he's being baptized, is Martin of Tours' feast day. Martin of Tours is a wonderful human being. But this is what's really cool. Can you lift it just a bit, John? So baptized, down a touch, up a bit, down, no, sorry, just. In 1483, when Luther is born, on November 11, he's baptized on the Western feast day of St. Martin of Tours, and so he's given his name. In a fascinating irony of history, it turns out that it was at a battle at Borbetomagus, which is the ancient name for this city. Now the city of, it's Worms. Worm. How do you say it? Worms. Worms. Okay, so this is a city, Martin of Tours, at the place that is going to be renamed Worms. It used to have this old name, Borbetomagus. He, as a Roman soldier, refused to fight because he'd become a Christian. And he refused to fight. He said, he took a historic stand at this place called Worms. He said, I am the soldier of Christ. It is not lawful for me to fight. You can imagine how the Roman army took to this. So what they did was they put him in a prison, and they were going to execute him. And they called him a coward. He was charged with cowardice and imprisoned. But he offered instead, he said, I'm not a coward. I will go to the front of the battle unarmed. But I have decided that as a Christian, I cannot fight. And they were going to let that happen, but just amazingly, the battle was called off. Something happened and the battle was diverted, it didn't happen. So then they realized that he wasn't a coward, and they released him from prison and from military service, and he became one of the greatest of the early Christian fathers. He's a beautiful man. And so, here's the irony. Martin Luther in 1521 has his most famous saying at exactly the same place, at the city of Worms. In 1521, Martin Luther is brought before the emperor and before a whole bunch of religious people, and they command him to submit and to apologize for everything he's written, just as they've done with Jan Hus 100 years before. They've given him safe conduct to be here, but probably it's not worth very much. And here they are, and at exactly the same city where his patron saint, Martin, had taken a historic stand, he takes a historic stand. And he says, here I stand, I can do no other. Well, he perhaps didn't say that because it wasn't included in the official transcript, but that's what Martin Luther's most famous for saying. Let me tell you what he really said. Let's go to the next page, John. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. 1521. There it is. Keep going to right down, up. There you go. There. 1521, Luther's finally excommunicated. In April, he appears at the Diet of Worms, where he refuses to recant with the following famous words. This is the official transcript. Since then, your serene majesties and your lordships seek a simple answer, I will give it in this manner, plain and unvarnished. Unless I am convinced by the testimony of the scriptures or clear reason, for I do not trust in the Pope or in the councils alone, since it is well known that they often err and contradict themselves, I am bound to the scriptures I have quoted, and my conscience is captive to the word of God. I cannot and will not retract anything, since it is neither safe nor right to go against conscience. I cannot do otherwise. God help me. Amen. So this is one of the great historic moments, and this is the beginning of the breaking free from the power of the authoritarian church and the governance of the feudal system. So this is an incredible moment in history in 1521 when Martin Luther takes this historic stand. He probably would be taken by the emperors. The emperor is furious. The emperor is the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. He's Charles V, and he is a young, very devout Catholic, and he is just furious that somebody would think The authority of Scripture is more important than the authority of church. So he wants him dead. And he's going to call him, right after this, the Edict of Worms is going to call Luther a criminal, and they're going to say that if anybody helps him in any way, they should be treated as a criminal. But you know what Frederick the Wise does? Frederick, the nobleman that is over Luther's area, he is very happy to have a kind of a more and more famous young university professor. He's happy to have somebody who's stirring the waters, and he protects him. He secretly kidnaps him on the way home so that nobody else can get him first, and he puts him in a castle for about 11 months, where Martin Luther does the incredible thing of translating the New Testament into German. And so John Wycliffe had done it in England. Hus thought it should be done in Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia, but now he's done it in German. And it's an incredible change because it's breaking free from the powers that have held everybody down in society. At this point in society, there's a small group of people that are considered nobles or aristocrats, and there is everybody else. And these people are called the peasants or the Vandals. Yeah. Yes.
Just since you wanted some.
Yeah, dude.
Fighting,
Yeah.
It's just ironic that he didn't live up to Martin of Tours, since Martin of Tours obviously cared about human life and Martin Luther didn't.
Exactly right. So this is the thing about Martin Luther, is he's such a hero, but he becomes such a jerk. So Luther is, and think of it, for those of us who've been raised in the Protestant tradition, I know not all of us have, but for those think of it, the very word that stands for what we are is protest. It's like a negative, not a positive. So anyway, yeah, there's so much to say about what Walt just said that I don't want to do it today, but I want to do it the minor way. It's minor. It's hard to. There are two ways in which Martin Luther is a horrible sinner. He doesn't believe it himself. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but there are two ways in which he destroys his reputation. And one way has to do with the Peasants' Revolution, but the second way has to do with anti-Semitism. That's the one I want to talk about. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. The reason I want to do the anti-Semitism rather than Peasants' Revolution is because it also has a strange, ironic connection that looks to me like the working or the weaving of strange symmetry in history. So I'll show you this. Oh, too much to say. Just a minute. Where can we go? There's so much to say. The main issue that Martin Luther gets upset about, I can do this in 2 seconds, is something called indulgences. And the idea is that when you die, in the medieval church, they believe that you go to something called purgatory, and there you have to atone for your sins and gradually become made ready for heaven. And the idea is that you could be there millions of years, and it'll be painful. And so what happens is that when they wanted to raise money for things, they would sell indulgences. And an indulgence meant, well, if you buy something, like you give some money to the building of this church, you can get your relative out of purgatory. Yeah. So this is the way it works. So this man, Tetzel, comes into Martin Luther's area close by it. He's not actually allowed in. And he says this in German: every time a coin in the coffer rings, another soul from purgatory springs. Martin Luther thinks this is insane. And so he writes 95 Theses to object to this, and that's how the Reformation begins. And Articles 81 and 82 are interesting. He says, this unbridled preaching of indulgences makes it difficult even for learned men to rescue the reverence which is due the Pope from slander or from the shrewd questions of the laity. He's going, like, anybody with any brain in their head will see how stupid this is. And then look at this one. Why, this would be the great question, why doesn't the Pope empty purgatory for the sake of holy love and the dire need of the souls that are there, if he redeems an infinite number of souls for the sake of miserable money with which to build a church? The former reason would be most just, the latter is most trivial. So So that's how it all gets started, and away we go. But Luther, although he doesn't always have the same exact attitude, in 1543, reads a pamphlet which makes him believe that the Jews are actually taking advantage of the Christians. And he gets angry. And Luther is a blunderbuss. He is a very hard person to work with. He's so heroic and strong in some instances. He's such a very difficult human being in others. And Luther starts to become so offended at the Jews that he writes a terrible book, 65,000 words, and it's a terrible book in which he says that rabbis, if they won't stop teaching, should be torn limb from limb, synagogues should be destroyed, Jewish books should be burned, that all property should be taken from Jews, and he is just. It's just the worst thing that you could imagine. He's going to die in 1546. So some Lutheran people who want to make excuses for him say he wasn't himself by that time. They try to make excuses. But really, in his life, he had already demonstrated some of the same things. Rabbis had come to him early on because they thought he was sympathetic to them, because he had written early on in his life, he'd said, the Jews have been treated so badly by the Christians, no wonder they don't want to become Christians. But then he thought when they heard the pure gospel that he was giving, that they would want to convert. And so when they didn't, he became angry with them. And rabbis came and said, your Frederick is he's commanding all the Jews to leave our area, and we want you to please appeal to him. He'll listen to you. And Luther said, I will not. So in other words, he had this anti-Semitism all the way through. He thought he wanted Jews, early in his life, he wants Jews treated well because he hopes they'll convert. When they don't, he has no... So guess what happens? And here's the irony that I'm going to finish this teaching with. It comes to the 20th century. And the 20th century, we have Ernst von Roth, and we have Herschel Grinspan, and their names are forever entangled. Because Grinspan is 17-year-old, he is a Polish Jew living in Germany, from a very poor, very religious family. And what happens is that as Hitler is becoming stronger and stronger with the Nazis, the Polish Jews are the first to bear some of the prejudice. And their German citizenship is revoked, and 12,000 of them are exiled. So they have nothing, and they're living in pigsties on the border of Poland. Poland doesn't even want them. They have a Polish heritage, but they've been German citizens, but their citizenship has been revoked. They are now being treated like refugees, and Grinspan's parents are in this group. And Grinspan he meant to go to Palestine to study, but his parents were waiting for something. The family didn't have much money. They sent him instead to relatives in Paris. For a year, he walked around Paris. He couldn't get a job. He didn't have legal standing there. And gradually, he just became very, very depressed. And what he does when this final indignity happens, and his parents and his sisters are on the border in these refugee camps, he just goes so angry that on November the 7th, 1938, he goes into the German embassy in Paris, and he says, I have some intelligence to share with the most superior officer here. He's hoping to meet the ambassador. But the ambassador's gone out for a walk, so they give him actually a junior civil servant named Ernst von Roth. And he says, you have something to tell me? And he said, yes. And he pulls out a pistol that he bought that morning, and he shoots him. Von Roth dies 2 days later on November the 9th. It's revenge for the 12,000 exiled Polish Jews. Well, it just turns out that the most important event in Nazi history is the failed coup d'etat from 1923. Hitler went to prison for it, 5-year sentence, but only served about 9 months. But he went to prison for it. In Munich, it's called the Beer Hall Putsch. It was 1923, it was November 8th and November 9th. So the Nazis in this area are having the celebration of the anniversary when they hear the news that von Roth in Paris has died. And Goebbels, who is the marketing manager, communication propagandist for the Nazi regime, he says, he speaks with Hitler first, and then he speaks to the crowd of people that are gathered, and he says, this attack by this Jewish man on our German embassy is an attack of all Jews on all Germans. The police will stand down. People start immediately phoning everyone that they can phone, and then all hell breaks loose in the worst night, one of the worst nights in the 20th century. I guess there's so many to choose from. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, followed immediately, and through the night and all into the next day, November 10th, 267 synagogues were destroyed, 7,000 businesses were damaged or destroyed, 30,000 Jewish men were rounded up, put in concentration camps, hundreds of fatalities as people were beaten and their homes were demolished. This is Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. It's November the 10th. Remember that date from early on? That's Martin Luther's birthday. Soon the Nazis realized this had happened on the anniversary of Martin Luther's birthday. His anti-Semitic writing was well known and appreciated already by Nazi writers, Nazi leaders. He'd already been spoken of by Hitler in Mein Kampf, which Hitler in the 1920s had produced when he was in prison. He had spoken of Luther as one of history's greatest reformers. After Kristallnacht, his words were used by others as a form of justification. So this is so interesting that, I mean, look at the timing of it. It's Martin Luther's birthday. Here's the guy who's going to be the great hero of the Protestant world, the guy who's going to open the door to a better life, breaking free from the authoritarianism of the church and the feudal government at the time. There is quite a lot to celebrate about Martin Luther's legacy, but his horrible work with the Peasants' Revolution, which would take another time to talk about, or his horrible anti-Semitism it's going to come back, and it's going to come back 500 years later in this way. But here's the most ironic thing of all. Greenspan, the 17-year-old, wrote this in a postcard that he bought. He wrote before he went and killed the man. He wrote this, he put it in his pocket, and it was a message for his parents. With God's help, my dear parents, I could not do otherwise. May God forgive me. The heart bleeds when I hear of your tragedy and that of the 12,000 Jews. I must protest so that the world hears my protest, and that I will do. Forgive me, Herman. See the connections with what Martin Luther said when he stood at Worms in 1521, when he took his heroic stand, and he said, God help me, I can do no other. Isn't it interesting that this person, that the same, who will be tied forever to Martin Luther's anti-legacy, said the same kind of thing. God help me, I can do no other. Takes a heroic stand. So on the one hand, I think the connection with St. Martin of Tours that I talked about, and ironically at the village of Worms, that seems so beautiful. This one seems so dark. I got nothing. I don't have a solution for you. But isn't it an interesting symmetry? Anybody want to tie this up in a bow and make it sound pretty for us? I can't do it. That's all I got for today. Maybe I just pray. If ever there was a demonstration of the weird and wonderful world that we live in with its crazy connections and coincidences that sometimes seem so random and sometimes don't, and sometimes are so filled with light and sometimes aren't, I don't know, Lord, what to make of all of this. I just know that I pray that we live with wisdom and discernment, It's not easy to make the right choices. It's easy to defend our choices when we make them. It's not easy to figure it out. And we can take someone like Luther, whose example is incredible in some ways and is so terrible in others. And think, the last 500 years of Christianity, Protestants have had such a strong voice, but what an interesting beginning. And what a terrible beginning in some ways. Heroic and angry and violent and vile in some ways. So I think we are all longing for something better, to be closer to the light, to be closer to the beauty that you've put in the world, to live with compassion, to get back to the ideas and the message of Jesus. Would you please forgive us that over the years, and in our own lives and in our own experience too, it's so often become less than what it was supposed to be. And would you give us the gift of awakening to see what it could be still? Amen, I guess. What do you think, Rick? Do you think?
Well, no, maybe. I mean, just because of this thing about the goose.
Yeah. Maybe. Okay. Rick brought a little video for us to watch at the end.
It's only a minute.
It's only a minute. So it's the poem by Mary Oliver. Could we? Let's finish with that.
Wild geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.